As Nora mentioned, my name is Cayal Mathura. I work at MediaMonks, SVP of Growth and Partnerships. So we're here today to talk to and hear from Mary, Kate, and Dedra. So maybe guys do a couple of quick intros, and then we'll jump into your stories.
Okay, I can jump in. Hi, everyone. Thanks for the invite for Innovators. Really excited to be here and love the opportunity to talk about the industry of sports. So I would be remiss to not talk about the role sports has played in both my professional and personal life. It's really been a constant throughout really all phases of my life. So from a participatory perspective, I found the sport of field hockey in the 6th grade and never turned back. And so for me, it was field hockey all the time. And that really helped me in terms of my career path. And that culminated for me in a full scholarship to play field hockey at the University of Maine, and then into a graduate assistant program, acting as a coach during my MBA. So from there, I moved into more of my professional career and working in financial services for the first 15 years of my career, spending about 10 years at TD Ameritrade, starting in very traditional marketing roles, and then having a great opportunity when the organization did a deal with Team USA to actually start, develop, and culminate a sports marketing organization. So that's how I got started in the world of sports. And for me, it was the ability to bring two of my passions together, marketing and sports. And it's really a joy and honor to be part of this industry. So my most recent role is at Toyota. I've spent the last 3 years working on both our global and domestic Olympic and Paralympic partnership. So sports led me to Toyota as well. Another great thing that sports has done as an advantage in my life. And when Toyota did a top sponsorship deal with the Olympic and Paralympics, they were looking for someone with some experience in the space. And so that led me to Toyota. So I've had a wonderful 3 years of really kind of building our platform around the Olympics and Paralympics, and really happy to be here. So thanks, Kyle.
Okay, tell us your story.
There. Hi there. Hi, Dedra and Cayal and everybody listening in. Thank you so much for the about something I'm passionate. I took a non-traditional entry into sports marketing, but have been with it for about 22 years or so. My background is in liberal arts, and I also ran cross country and track and field for 4 years at the College of the Holy Cross in Worcester, Massachusetts. And then after college, I moved to Germany and then Virginia and Texas. And throughout those journeys with my husband, had 4 children, and started my own consultancy. I taught at community colleges, and then I also freelanced in technical writing and journalism. But always, I'm the person who cried when Dina Castor won the bronze medal and Mecca Fleski won the silver medal in the marathon. I've always been passionate about the sport and been kind of that person who knows that Jeffrey Mutai ran a 2:03:02 in 2011. So I've always loved the sport of running. And when we moved back to Boston, where I'm from, the Olympics, the Celtics, the New York Marathon, USA Gymnastics, hockey, MLB, they were really in the sports game. So I knew all about John Hancock. And after running a road race and pitching an article to the Globe about this phenomenal female ultra runner, I got to know a few people, and they said, hey, we have a job that you might be interested in, reading and researching and writing and greeting the media about this elite athlete field that comes to the Boston Marathon. So I'm like, yes, please, me, please pick me. And from there, my role primarily now is with the Boston Marathon property. We are sponsors of both the Red Sox and the Boston Marathon. Those are our 2 premier properties. And for the marathon, it's really unique in the sports sponsorship world. We are the principal sponsor, but part of that sponsorship is owning the elite athlete around the world to represent our company and to be our media mavens, our ambassadors, to work for us throughout the year, but also on race week and to run a phenomenal race, which builds the media interest, which builds the sponsorship value. That's my primary role.
Cool. That's so interesting, and there's so many parallels because of course, obviously, you know, Toyota sponsor many athletes. But before we get into the specifics of that, I guess, you know, the elephant in the room. Let's get it over with. Let's talk about COVID. You know, beyond the obvious, or even including the obvious, why don't you both take us through a little bit about how that's impacted your businesses and your activities this year so far, and then also kind of how you see that impacting, you know, what you're doing going forward, especially in terms of, you know, staying involved with customers when events are being either postponed or cancelled, and basically getting, you know, continuing to derive that value from your sponsorships.
Yeah, so I'll start with this one. You know, I think obviously in the face of the postponement of the Olympics and Paralympics, which is really the culmination of, you know, the work that we do, Toyota, on both the global and domestic front, March 24th came around and our world was rocked. We knew it was imminent and that that it was likely, right, that the games were going to be postponed. And for countless reasons, I fully believe it was the right decision. But you know, we had a team of people who had poured their heart and soul for 2 years into this. And so I think we kind of quickly came to a fork in the road. And for me, it's almost personal. And it sounds like Mary Kate is as passionate about what she does as well. But I'm so deeply invested in finding ways to help advance the movement that, you know, it was a hard thing to overcome initially, but I think you have to make a deliberate choice, and that's what we did. So rather than being engulfed by frustration or, you know, or being kind of bogged down with you know, what's happening, we really chose to see this as an opportunity. And so this is a gift of time for us. We have an additional year to do a lot more things. We have an additional year with our most valuable assets, which are our Team Toyota athletes. We have 240 athletes around the globe that we work with and 29 here in the United States. So I think it took a moment to just kind of reground ourselves in what was really important. And the fact is that we have a clear vision for what we're trying to do with this platform. And it's all about demonstrating to the world that Toyota is no longer a car company, but we're a mobility company. And so that vision hasn't changed. We haven't wavered, you know, our commitment to showing the world and demonstrating that. And so I think it kind of gave you pause, but it also gave me a lot of hope and excitement that we have a longer runway to really deliver on what we're trying to do. And so, you know, maybe it's a different route, but we're still really gearing up to be able to deliver on those goals. I think one fundamental change that we made in terms of the way that we're planning is that with the Beijing Games beginning just 5 months after the end of the Tokyo Paralympics, you know, we found ourselves in really new territory here. So we are planning both of those now. Those are being planned in parallel. So that's something that's, you know, really new to us. And we quickly just kind of developed some guidelines around how to do that. You know, I simply kind of founded on this idea of do more with less and figure out how to drive efficiencies in everything that we're doing. So that's really kind of the process, the approach that we have in place. And, you know, I think you can certainly look at it as an opportunity of time. And for us, that's really what we're trying to do, to use this.
That makes a lot of sense.
I think the only other comment I'll make is that I think the most important thing for us, and it sounds like Mary Kate, was, you know, making sure that our athletes, who are crucial, they're core to really what we do, and they're really the heart of our program, that they understood that Toyota was behind them. And so very quickly we worked with each of them and extended all of their contracts to at least get us through Tokyo and many beyond. But that was a really deliberate decision to be made quite quickly. And you know, we look forward to continuing to work with them through Tokyo, Beijing, and hopefully moving forward.
Awesome. Mary Kate, COVID. Tell us how has that kind of changed what you're doing, and looking forward as well.
Sure, it's changed everything really. And I love Dedra's focus on the athletes that they are partnering with. That, of course, was one of our main focuses immediately when originally the marathon was postponed to September. As you may or may not know, it is now canceled and will be a virtual event. So the first thing we did was to check in with all of these athletes and agents and folks we work with every year around the globe. And in April, it was really phenomenal, the support we got. I offered each of the athletes the opportunity to come and, continue their contract with us. We paid them appearance fees and housing and lodging and travel for them and their contingents. And what was most amazing, all but one athlete who had already committed to a different fall race decided to stick with us through September. So that's basically them losing the opportunity for 2 potential paydays, a spring and a fall marathon. So that was a nice testament to the legacy that is the Boston Marathon and the support that John Hancock has given these athletes over the years. During our sponsorship, it's really one of the longest sports sponsorships in the world. It's 35 years going strong. We have invited over 900 elite athletes from 48 countries to be on the John Hancock Elite Athlete team. So it is a big impression, and that legacy was very important. Despite the changes due to COVID. So with John Hancock, one of our ambitions is to improve health and well-being of our customers, our employees, communities, and the marathon is a great fit. So typically, in a typical year, 85 million people would engage with this property, this primary property, which is the marathon. 30,000 people participate from 96 countries. 2 billion media impressions we get from this. 50 of the world's best athletes and ambassadors. $38 million is raised for nonprofits, $200 million in economic impact. So this is a big one-day event which is really celebrated. The advantage to sponsoring something that is so celebrated is that people are really passionate about the event, and it really allows our brand to shine. So when that shifted, when we knew we may not get that value, we now have to reevaluate the investment in the sponsorship and analysis. No newsletter, no press release, nothing goes out there with our logo or attachment or affiliation without it being tracked and analyzed. So we were able to highlight to our stakeholders and to who we had partnerships with where we typically achieve value and where it would be impossible to achieve value now that COVID hit and Patriots Day was not going to happen. And we also have a long history in sports sponsorship overall. So some of the things we had done in the past, testing pay-for-performance models and other innovations that we had made along the way, all started to come into play. So we brought all of this together with our great team of Barbara Goose and Kate Ardini, Ellie Malloy, and Fee Ahrens. And we rolled up our sleeves and said, how are we going to still get value from this sponsorship? What's going to be rolled over? What are we going to pay for? What are we going to not pay for? So it was really a combining of a team. At the same time, what are you going to do on Patriot? And 23 years, the world's oldest annual marathon, and now it's not going to happen. What do we do for that community? Because we are invested in them. So what we did, our comms group is amazing. They developed a gratitude campaign. So before Patriots Day, they rolled this out, and basically we lit up the city blue to support frontline workers. We immediately donated $1 million to the Resiliency Fund. We provided 9,000 lunches to hospital staff. We just kept up that community support. We've been in the Boston community for 158 years. It's an expectation, and it's something we know is the right thing to do. We took part of our marathon media spend, and our creative team developed an amazing ad spot. We had been absent from TV for a while. We jumped back into TV. Local broadcasts and national broadcasts were streaming and broadcasting all day long on Patriots Day. So every half hour we had this ad spot running, and basically it was beautiful imagery of an empty course. And the verbiage was just wonderful. It said, we're speaking of resiliency and community. And this is our statement of solidarity with the frontline workers, that even though we're not all together on Patriots Day, we're more together than ever in our support for all those frontline workers. So we were happy to make that shift. So on one side, we're still getting value for the sponsorship. On the other side, we're still supporting the community. Our community nonprofit bibs are still at $28 million. And this is now for a virtual event. So that's a statement to the passion that runners bring and our partnership with about 150 local nonprofits. And so through the virtual event, how we also made that pivot, because it is another pivot to a virtual event, which has never been done before. We're supporting that through elite athlete engagement. And part of the beauty of owning the elite athlete field is that in their contract, we have them appearing for us on behalf in the past. So Bill Rogers, Matt Keflezighi, Des Linden, Dina Castor, all of our heavy hitters have appeared on Zoom calls with business units, been inspirational, motivational, and we're still getting a lot of value from those athletes. So on September 14th, leading up to race week, we're going to have relays from around the world, Kenya, Ethiopia, Japan, of elite athletes. 3 people will participate. It's a friendship. And it's an allyship. We're all in this together. So the elite athletes are going to be motivating and encouraging about 18,000 people who will be running the virtual event all around the world. So we're bringing Boston to the world this year.
Yeah. Wow, thanks for sharing that. It's really thoughtful. I think let's change gear a little bit. Obviously, today is about women in sports marketing. Let's focus a little bit on that. Dedra, why don't you tell us a little bit about how has it been for you being a woman in such a male-dominated industry?
Yeah, thanks for the question. Always happy to talk about this topic. I think it can oftentimes be polarizing, but I think the way I view it is that we as leaders, as humans, men or women, we have this arsenal of tools available to us. And I think some we choose to really exploit intentionally, and others are just part of our DNA, right? So I think, like it or not, being a woman is kind of part of that arsenal. And I think you just have to figure out how to make that work as an advantage to you. We're obviously all judged as humans, and we're applauded, we're criticized for everything we do, from physical appearance to our nonverbal actions to socioeconomic status and definitely gender. So I think unfortunately, especially right now in 2020, it feels unfair that there are still a number of inequities happening, I think in the women's landscape. But for me, it's all about being self-aware. And I think having the professional capacity to really be able to assess and understand, I think each interaction that you have and kind of choose to really kind of lean into particular aspects of what makes you unique based on the situation. And I think, gender falls in that category. So, I think it takes time to hone in on how that works for you. But, I think it's regardless of what you choose to exploit, I think it's crucial that whatever version of you put out there, it's still unapologetically you. And, I think that takes some time to hone, but, I think we can pretty quickly hunt out who the phonies are. So for me, I really personally choose to acknowledge and be aware of, I think what happens in the marketplace. We know, right, that there's a very small percentage of women in executive leadership roles in the US. The wage gap still is very real in the year 2020. And, I'm very aware of that, but I also don't get that bogged down, or I think let myself get frustrated with that in everyday life. So it's all about focusing on the controllables. I believe, and my experience has been that, as a man or a woman, as someone, I think who has had a lot of opportunities in the sports industry, that if you show up and you really demonstrate that you're an asset and that you're adding the value that no one else can, in whatever capacity that is, that's unique to you, that will transcend gender. And I'm fortunate that that's been my experience largely. Certainly have there been some circumstances where, I felt like there were some inequities, absolutely. But my perspective is, is show up and show the value that you can't be overlooked. And lastly, I'll just say that I think some of my strongest allies and the best mentors I've had in my life have have been and continue to be men and women, right? So I think this idea of, I think dispelling the myth a little bit of this men against women thing is kind of where my head's at in my experience, right? It's really been a great experience in the sports industry. And, I think it's really crucial that you build yourself a strong network, a support system that's really fully inclusive. And that includes, a diverse set of voices, men, women, ethnicities. And for me, that's, I think that's kind of how I've treaded maybe this territory. I think one thing I would just say is one thing that I've noticed, and we talked a little bit about this yesterday, Cayal and Mary-Kate, is, I think being very self-aware, this idea of self-awareness as a woman or a man. But one thing that I've seen and noticed in numerous interactions with particularly women leaders, but this could definitely, be something that male counterparts could also express, is the fact that we oftentimes we undermine ourselves with our own language. This whole idea of I've even seen executive women do it in conference rooms and in meetings and on stage, of this idea of apologizing before sharing an opinion. I've heard things like, "I'm sorry, but can I say something?" Or, "I have an idea, but I'm not sure if it's a good one." So I think it's just being super aware of your language and really every word, right, that you're putting out there, because you're building your brand, man or woman, and that's something that follows you. So, again, I think I choose to really look at, I think the sports industry as a great opportunity as a woman leader, and feel really fortunate to be surrounded by such a great group of other leaders, men and women, across this industry and in other industries as well.
Mary-Kate.
That's a great response, Dedra. Good job. Yeah, I think, maybe just dividing it a little bit between internal and external. So internal, I agree, find an ally, a female ally. At John Hancock, we're really lucky. Our CEO is a woman, Marianne Harrison. She's amazing, intelligent, authentic. Our CMO, Barb Goose, is a woman. Our brand lead is a woman, Kate Ardini. And my two teammates, Ellen and Fee, are women and best in the business. So surround yourself with allies, people who understand you, understand your passion, understand all your little quirks and your positives and negatives. And then I think, internally, intelligence is always going to win. So become an expert in your field, become an expert in your sport, in your niche, whatever you need to do. Be constantly researching, reading, what is next, innovating, strategizing, improving. Do that research. And if you want to move the needle, if you want to do something different, if you want to do a test, you have your foundation, you can make a case, you can be your own advocate. Don't be shy about speaking up. And then externally, I've worked mostly with men in this industry. From the 6 World Marathon Majors, the race directors are all male. The World Athletic Leads are all male. Most of the agents, I'd say 90% are male. Shoe reps, most of them are male. Media, starting to be a good mix. There are some amazing female journalists who are covering the sport. But I don't think along the way that has really impacted my focus on getting the job done. I've worked with some amazing men and women, and the majority are insightful and collaborative. One thing that has helped me throughout my career is my husband gave me this advice a long time ago, but he said, process over personality. So don't get hung up on work styles. Find a mutual area of agreement and leave the table with both sides getting close to what they want. There's 2 parties. You're not always going to get everything you want, but you both can get close to what you want. So when I hire 50 athletes every year, you have to be patient. You have to be true to yourself. You have to always do the right thing. You have to reduce the reputational risk of your company. And this transcends gender. You know what I mean? And even though I joke, sometimes, working with a few agents, I have put them in the penalty box. And no one knows that but me. But if you're not working with someone who's also doing the right thing, it makes things difficult. And get the job done. Don't get hung up on personality. And then I also think externally, women need to be mentors and allies for other women in sports marketing. It's very important. Over the past few years, there have been a number of women becoming recruiters, and that has not always been the case. So Marla Runyon, who actually was in the John Hancock Elite team a while ago and an Olympian, is legally blind. And she now works for the Boston Athletic Association, recruiting the para field and the wheelchair fields. And she is a great resource for me. She is phenomenal. And, you know, as you travel your journey, you're going to meet people who are younger than you that want advice. One agent comes to mind. She's in her 20s. She's from Ethiopia, lives in New York. Every time I'm in New York, she reaches out to me. She says, can we have coffee? Can we have tea? Can I sit and meet with you? And she taps my brain. And I talk to her about her athlete group. I tell her to keep pushing. For several years with athletes, they're just not good enough for the elite athlete field. This year, she finally had an athlete who was good enough for the elite athlete field. I took her into the group. She is now part of our family. So, you know, just being that advocate for people growing up, and it might be the teacher in me coming out, but I do love to mentor people who are just entering this field, because it's not easy. You have to stick your elbows out. You know, in track and field, you're always sticking your elbows out because you want to maintain your lane. You want to maintain your pace. That doesn't override that you can be a decent human being along the way. So those are a couple of tips for women in sports marketing.
That's cool. That's a great metaphor. And I love the fact that you both touched on talent and merit and you know, and bringing your best selves forward. I think that's really, it's really positive, because I think a lot of these conversations can get weighed down in, you know, aspects that are outside of your control. As you just said, actually, it's a lot of it is about sort of what to do next and how to make the changes. On a sort of broader note, if we have time, briefly wanted to touch on the sort of like wider diversity and inclusion as a whole. And if you guys don't mind sort of taking us of kind of what your organizations are doing on that. I know we touched upon, you know, seats on the board, representation, all of that stuff. So anything sort of taking it a bit out of sports marketing, but overall organizational activities, initiatives, things like that, that it would be cool to share.
Yeah, I actually just wanted to make one last comment after hearing Mary Kate. I think we're very much aligned really in our philosophy around being a woman in the industry. But I think one really important thing is also the fact that we have such an advantage because we work in the sports industry. And as we all know, there's so much passion for sports, and sports is really a universal unifier for men, for women. And I think it really allows us to find commonalities, you know, across you know, a diverse set of humans. And so I think it's also exploiting the fact that, you know, we work in a space where people have such passion, and it can really be, I think, a shared value, a shared topic to continue to grow and develop relationships. And then I think lastly, you know, I think we have a responsibility. I echo what Mary Kate says, as women leaders in the sports industry, to also to have a voice and to make sure that we're using that voice, and, you know, ensuring that if there are, you know, things that we don't feel, you know, I think good about, or things have been handled in a way that really are not in line with our expectations, that we have confidence to step up and share our voice. And hopefully that will be learning moments for people along the way. But I just wanted to echo what you said, Mary Kate, because I think you made some really very strong points. But then I think thinking about diversity, you know, and inclusion, obviously a very hot topic. And, you know, I think at Toyota, we, you know, we have kind of what we call it One Toyota, and that's really, there's some core tenets that live underneath, you know, our brand, and two of them, which are really, I think, quite relevant in the current time, is that, you know, continuous improvement and respect for people, and those are two pillars that have really been core to what we do, and I think really help guide us as we strive to be leaders in diversity, you know, and inclusion. And, you know, I think one of the, maybe it sounds simple, but I think one of the probably most fundamental changes that I've seen, you know, over just the last few months being at Toyota is, you know, I think we're having conversations, ongoing tough conversations. We're talking about it. We're talking about racism, we're talking about social injustices, we're talking about inequities that are unfolding around us, in front of us, and we're really being challenged as leaders to, to identify our own prejudices, our own biases. And it's really hard work, right? It's uncomfortable, and people are pushing one another outside of their comfort zone. But I think there's never been a better time, a more important time for us to do that. So although it sounds simple, it's really, I think, been a great opportunity for all of us to kind of be introspective and take a hard look at, your experiences and your biases. And so I think that's probably the biggest change that we've seen. But we're also, of course, actively asking our team members to get involved. So we're finding a lot of ways, not just, I think, saying the right things. We're really trying to actively participate in creating a better society. And so, encouraging things like volunteerism. We have, a system in place where, you can, use a day off to volunteer. Again, some things hopefully that can help break down some social barriers. We have a number of business partnering groups at Toyota to give our team members a positive voice and whatever's really important to them. We're encouraging team members to make contributions to nonprofits, gift matching, and I think there's a list of things that are happening, but I would say the most important is the fact that it's really become really core to our discussion as a leadership team, and a real responsibility that we feel in terms of having accountability for driving these conversations forward. And it is tough, right? I think you don't want to say the wrong thing. I think there's some hesitation around, I think having these hard conversations, but I feel really empowered to be able to have the conversations, and we're all going to make some mistakes, but let's figure it out together and move forward. And I'm really grateful that the Toyota organization has truly embraced, I think, sort of this path forward for us.
So Mary Kate, rather than go about that, I've told that we're edging into our Q&A time. So I might start with a question for you instead, if you don't mind. But I will make it adjacent to that. So
I can answer this really quickly.
Yeah.
So we committed over the next 2 years, Manulife, which is our parent company, are committed to investing $500 million over the next 2 years. We're going to increase diversity by 30%, and then we're committing 25% to hiring graduates of BIPOC, so Black, Indigenous, and people of color. So we're really putting our money behind those initiatives. There.
Okay, so on that note, do you think, or do you believe, rather, that teams but more likely organizations that engage with philanthropic endeavors such as those you've just mentioned are more likely overall to be inclusive in terms of their own cultures internally? I.e., does that investment kind of filter back into the organization and the culture you live in?
Oh, the partnerships we make? Yes. Okay. So this is great. We're on top of this. So every year, as part of our sponsorship, we have 1,000 nonprofit bibs, and we disperse those throughout the community. So picture, 150 nonprofits. They support their mission, which includes a lot of DEI efforts, is supported by marathon runners. So the average raise by one marathon bib, and we donate 1,000, is about $11,000. So during the tenure of our sponsorship, BAA and John Hancock nonprofit runners have raised $372 million for these nonprofits. These nonprofits are living DEI every single day. They are doing the work, and they have been for decades. So yes, community is very important to Hancock, and it's very important to the marathon sponsorship.
Cool. Okay, Dedra, I might ask you something else, just to kind of mix it up a little bit. We don't have too long. Consumer behavior. What trends are you seeing in the marketplace in terms of consumer behavior, and which of those are important to you and your business?
That's a good question. So it's something that we're, tracking very closely. So I think one thing that, of course, we continue to really keep a pulse on is the interest in the Olympics and Paralympics, right? With the postponement of the games, do consumers, with it now being another year away, do American consumers particularly, are they still as interested and are they still as heavily invested as they have been? And I think for us, the good news is that it more than ever, American consumers have an intent to watch the games, and not even an intent, an actual expectation that by having the games proceed, that they're going to feel really better about, I think, society sort of returning to, whatever our new normal is. But, I think that's one thing that we continue to track very closely. We're also, of course, using our social channels to understand just consumer sentiment in general. And I think that's one thing we've probably, I think, really honed in on, is taking the time to listen and to learn. What are consumers saying? How are they acting? How is consumer behavior changing? Social media is a great tool, of course, for that, because you can get a pulse on what's happening out there very quickly, and to have the opportunity to refine what you're doing as quickly. So, I think one thing that we've really focused in on is our message still relevant? Is it still resonating? Are we being sensitive to what's happening? And we've been really working closely, actually, with Cayal's team at MediaMonks, who do a lot of work with us, in full disclosure here, mapping out, really taking a hard look at what's happening in the marketplace and mapping out a new narrative for us. And it's a narrative that's more nimble than it's ever been. It's really, I think, sensitive and ever changing. And so, for us, it's, I think, one thing we also understand and know, which makes me so thrilled to be part of the Olympic and Paralympic movement, is that, our Team Toyota athletes, their stories, that they really continue to resonate with consumers. And so I think it's been one interesting maybe insight is, I think that now we know, right? Consumers are yearning for sports. We're being starved of live sport programming. And it's really cool to see that our consumers are still really responding positively. It's resonating, our athlete storytelling. And so, what we've seen is that, I think, as athletes who are facing all of the same things we're facing in a global pandemic, they're really being humanized in this time period. And so it's making them very relatable to people. And so it's kind of just maybe a nuance in the way we've messaged, or we've communicated our message, but it's been, I think, really insightful for us to figure out how to make sure that narrative is really mirroring consumer sentiment.
Awesome. Thank you. Great answer. Mary Kate, how about Hancock and, your social endeavors, your messaging, right now? What are you seeing, especially in the running community with your athletes? I'd love to hear a little bit about that.
Commitment is supporting health awareness with our customers, our employees, and our communities. So let's just talk about life insurance. So we're leading a change in life insurance, in the life insurance industry, through our Vitality product, which basically is a policy which rewards you for running, walking, meditating, for living a healthier life. It actually lowers your premium. So this is a big push for us, just because of our commitment to this culture of well-being. And then just the health of our employees would be a second pillar. So this spring alone, 1,500 employees participated in a Work Your Way to a Virtual 5K in the Global Running Day. And we have a similar spring series going on. And we partner with Best Buddies, Special Olympics. Because of our marathon partnerships, we're able to afford these opportunities to run these other events or ride these other events with groups like Best Buddies and Special Olympics. And then just that investment in physical and financial and mental well-being in the community is ongoing. With the Red Sox, we've been a long-time partner with, with the Red Sox, a long-time sponsor of the John Hancock Fantasy Day at Fenway. That's raised about $8 million for cancer research through the Jimmy Fund. And then we also support Hats Off to Heroes during the game, and Home Base, which are two programs supporting military veterans. So we're trying to, make that product alignment with our sponsorship rather than just brand awareness. We're trying to align products that we sell with this sponsorship. And there really is a wonderful, authentic, natural fit with the marathon.
Let's go back to the topic, women in sports marketing. What advice would you both give to a woman who was starting off a career in sports marketing today, knowing what you know, and obviously in today's landscape?
Jump in, do it, go for it.
It's the best place to be. I think I would say surround yourself with as many others who have kind of paved the way for you as you possibly can, and really just lean into developing a support system, and go for it. You know, I think take risks, be bold, and really just have faith in kind of where you're setting your sights. And it's the best industry to work in. And you know, I think just finding ways to add value and continuing to just embrace and be truly grateful for having the opportunity to be in this space. And I really try to take a step back every once in a while, take a moment to really just, I think, appreciate the fact that you are in this industry. And so I think also not taking that for granted is really important. But I would say first and foremost, it's creating a network, a support system that can really kind of help advocate for you and guide you along the way, because there are twists and turns in this industry that you can never anticipate, but that's what makes it so much fun.
Definitely agree with Dedra. Also, you know, it's okay if every day you wake up excited to work with the people that you've surrounded yourself with, excited to work with your athletes. This is okay. You know, it doesn't have to be, oh, that will never happen. You can make it happen. Find where you're passionate about, find that niche, become well-informed, and jump in. My kids are like, I can't believe you have your job. You're so lucky. I can't believe you. And I'm like, I'm lucky.
I love that you say that. I love that you say that, Mary Kate, because I've had advice before given to me that you really have to separate work and personal life. And I think when you're a person that is so passionate about what you do and live in the world of sports marketing, actually, I fully believe that, no, you actually can embrace, right, the fact that your personal life and your professional life, sports are such an integral part of that, and just be really grateful that that's even an option for us.
That's a pretty great place to be. That's the dream, right? Well, I'm getting the Oscar nod. So if you thank you so much for sharing your stories, incredible accomplished stories, and hopefully that was interesting and useful for those listening and watching. So thanks again.
Thank you so much. Appreciate the opportunity.
I'm sorry, but can I say something? Nah, just kidding. I heard you do good. This was so great to hear you out, Mary Kate and Dedra. I actually have one question, because I thought it was really interesting to hear your thoughts on consumers. But then, like earlier on, you talked about a focus on the athletes, and like with the Olympics and Paralympics being so kind of unique because it's once every 4th year. I mean, many athletes are looked upon as privileged, etc., but there are so many athletes coming into the Olympics, like doing everything to focus on that one moment, like training for 4 years, like focusing on their climax. So, I mean, having that connection with athletes, how do you feel about them trying, keeping them motivated to, of course, train, and of course they are, but it's kind of a restart, and also like keeping the connection with the fans going, etc. Do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, I would say that in my experience working with Olympic and Paralympic athletes, they are the most resilient and driven human beings on the face of the earth. I have been just so enthralled by the fact that they could, in a couple of days, just really overcome the announcement that they were going to be competing in 4 months, and now they're competing in a year and 4 months. So, I think they don't have any lack of inspiration or commitment to be able to continue training. And I think we're just honored to be a part of that. So it doesn't take a lot for us to continue to influence or push them. It's really a natural connection, and certainly our honor to just be a small part of the journey that they're on to the game. So we have the great ability to tell their stories, and we take that very seriously.
Thank you so much. And thank you so much. Yes, sorry, Mary-Kate, go ahead.
Oh, I agree. And all our Olympians, because we usually bring in a whole lot of Olympians, they are not stopping. They are resilient runners, leaders, and they're going to just be the example for all of us who are out there hitting the roads every chance we can get just to run our 3 miles. They're awesome.
That's right.
They just have to make a new plan, right?
That's right.
Thank you so much. It's been incredible to hear insights and empowerment and to have you. I think I want to remind those of you watching that you can